Hello, everyone. Welcome to Author Nation Interviews. Today, we're talking about how to write a book when your brain doesn't want to follow the rules that society has set out for it, especially if you're navigating creative chaos, the myth of perfection, or ADHD. I'm your host, Melody Ann, here to share practical insights and strategies to help you thrive as an author and make a meaningful impact with your work. Remember to visit authornation.online to explore a wealth of resources created just for you. So whether you're starting your day or unwinding in the evening, get comfortable. It's time to meet our guests. Since 2010, certified ADHD coach Nikki Kinzer and a professional podcaster and co-founder of the True Story FM podcast network. I need to know more about that, actually. Pete Wright have been the co-hosts of the award-winning podcast Taking Control, the ADHD podcast, speaking to adults with ADHD all over the globe. Over 30 seasons and more than 600 episodes, Nikki and Pete continue to offer support and strategies for adults living with ADHD. And now, you could guess it, they've decided to write their own book. That's why they're here. Unapologetically ADHD, a step-by-step framework for everyday planning on your terms. All right. Hello, Pete and Nikki. How are you guys today?
So good and so grateful to be here.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. I really want to just start with a little bit of your origin story, let's say. So how did ADHD podcast come alive?
That's a great question. It actually started with a conversation that Pete and I had. So Pete has been a part of my business since day one, and I actually started as a professional organizer. So the company used to be called Take Control Organizing. And I was invited to do a weekly radio show, local radio show on organizing. And because Pete's been with me since day one, he's also sort of my go-to person of, what do you think about this? Does this sound like a good idea? And he said, no, it doesn't. It doesn't sound like a good idea. And I think, I don't think you should do a weekly local radio show. I think you should have a podcast. Like, let's do a podcast. And this was back in 2010, where I had no idea what a podcast was. They were not very popular. He did. Thankfully, he knew what it was and he knew what he was doing. I honestly thought it was something that was just going to go on the website, like a blog. I thought you would have to go to the website to listen to it. I didn't realize that all you had to do was go into iTunes and go to podcasts and we would be there. If I had known that, I don't know if I would have done it. So I'm kind of glad that I didn't. No. So for a couple of years, we did the organizing podcast. And then at that point, I had decided to switch my focus to ADHDers, because most of my clients did have ADHD and it was a real interest of mine. I really enjoyed doing the work. And so we switched everything and went to the organizing podcast to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.
Yeah. And then from there,
that's all she wrote. Yeah.
Yeah. And from there to the book, Pete, right? Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, it was a long road between there and the book, and the show has kind of evolved over the years. But we ended up getting a call into the TCA, global HQ, from a publisher who said, you know what, I have ADHD and I listen to your show and I love it. And have you ever thought about writing a book? And so it was they came to us and said, we'd like to turn this sort of library that you've created over the last 15 years into something, on page. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And it took a bit of thinking. And I'll just say in all candor, we had written a book which we had self-published back in the day. It was an organizing book, and mm-hmm. It was hard.
It was so hard.
It was so hard. And, I think a lot of things change over the years. The fact that our relationship has changed as we've been working together for so long. And so, if the eventuality, that we said yes to a second book came with a lot more tools, I think, in working together and in figuring out how to write, our our most important kind of message. And so we did, and now we have this book, Unapologetically ADHD, and it's I hope helping a lot of people.
I love this title. I have clients who work and write with ADHD, and so I'm excited for them to have this tool. So that's really exciting. Now I'm going to say that I think there are two things that can happen. One, if you try to write a book the first time, whether you're successful or it's the beautiful book that you've always wanted or not, that gives you a lot of experience for your next try. And secondly, the tools we have today to write a book can really simplify the process in many ways. And so I'm glad that first book didn't turn you off, and that you took the plunge and you decided to write a second book. So let's talk about your writing process. I know Pete, you've called your writing process creatively chaotic. So can you talk a little bit about what that means? And then I'd love to hear from Nikki about her writing process and see, like, how did they work together, or didn't they? Or how did they work together?
Yeah, we don't need them to work together. That would be sadistically chaotic, I think is what we would call that. No, my writing process is typically just churn out as much as I can, and in short sprints. And that has been a lesson hard won over the years. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I imagine. So I find, at least, for the process of the book, I would absolutely just try to change context, try to leave the day job office, go someplace else, set up my computer in an environment that is different and stimulating. I always need some noise. In order to silence all of the different sort of distracting voices I have in my head, I have to have some background noise going on, and then get to work and write in short, very, very short sprints. And the old saw, always end mid-sentence, right? Always end knowing the next thing I'm going to write, and so that I always come back not feeling completely lost. The way this book came together, the structure of the book is, it's very much like our podcast. I imagine there may not be a lot of people listening to your show who have already crossed over to the ADHD podcast. I invite you to come listen to us if you live with ADHD. Yes. We'd love you to find a second home. But the book attempts to capture our voice as much as possible. So Nikki is writing the coaching stuff, and the real meat and substance and sort of tutelage comes from Nikki's experience as a coach without ADHD. And my stuff is, look, I live with ADHD, and here's how it feels. Like, all the stuff Nikki's writing about, here's how it feels to live that. And here are some of the things I do for myself to help accommodate that. As such, like, we had a lot of flexibility to do sort of a call and response to each other as we're writing the book. And that, I think that made it really fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like how you talk about just getting words on paper, not thinking it through, but just allowing things to get out rather than trying to be perfect, and we can talk about that later if you want. Sure. I also love that you finish mid-sentence. I often say that to my authors. Look, if you have trouble starting again, finish mid-sentence, finish mid-thought, finish mid-paragraph, because then when you come back and you read it back, it'll help, right? So Thank you for that, Pete. Nikki, what about you?
Yes, some similarities for sure, and a little bit different, because he was, his part of the book is definitely more of like an essay. He's a storyteller, and I'm much more, this is how to do this, or these are some ways to do this. It's very nonfiction part. Not that his is fiction, because it's not. It's all him. It's real. It's him. But it was a different kind of writing than what he's doing, right? So for me, what was really important was that I wrote about something I knew a lot about. And that I was very comfortable with. I had a lot of experience with. And so when we picked the planning and systems and how to plan your week, how to plan your day, that is something that I work with my clients every day. I have a membership that's based around that. So I was pulling off of a lot of experience, which was really helpful. I've done a lot of presentations around planning and time management. So the very first thing that I started doing was looking at these old blog posts, these old podcast scripts that we've done in the past around planning, the presentations that I've done, and started to like really gather the information into one spot and start putting it together. So it was almost like a puzzle for me was, what is the first step? What's the second step? And so trying to figure out what all that looked like Pete, I found very quickly that I needed to leave the house. I could not write in my office where I do my regular work. I was interrupted way too much with my family, interrupted by work stuff that would draw me in. And it just was not a good environment. So I would leave the house. I would go, there was a couple of different coffee shops that I enjoyed going to. Like Pete, I had to have noise, but I couldn't listen to the people around me because I'd be listening to their conversations because that's more fun than writing, right? So
we're both huge gossips. Did we mention that?
Yeah, I want to know what's going on. Yeah. So I actually found a couple of playlists on classical music and music to study, to work. And that was not anything I ever expected. I did not realize that would be so helpful for me. But it certainly was. I would get that music on. I would start listening to that piano. And if it started like raising its intensity, I felt my intensity getting really revved up and like excited about what I was writing about. And that made a huge difference. So.
Yeah. I love that you recognized that you needed to get out of the house and that you found the right noise, right? Some of us need noise, some of us need silence. You needed noise, but you found the right noise for that. And I also have to say that, Neil Gaiman was quoted as saying that he goes to a coffee shop to write, and he considers writing, the actual act of writing, daydreaming about what he might write, or listening in to other people's conversations to get good dialogue ideas. So suggesting, just letting you know, Nikki, not so bad if you're listening.
Not such a bad idea. Yeah.
Not such a bad idea. Yes. All right. ADHD and deadlines can be a messy combo. I mean, I struggle with deadlines. I think we all struggle with deadlines, but there's this extra layer, right? So how did you use external accountability to keep yourselves moving along with this book?
I couldn't have written the book without it.
Fair enough.
That's I don't have ADHD. I'll be fair, but I don't, but it was critical for me to have these deadlines.
Yeah. Yeah. And Pete, how did they help?
Well, yeah. I mean, deadlines are critical. I felt like that too. I had external sort of reminders, my task management system, my work management system. They were constantly pinging me, reminding me. One of the muscles I've been really developing is breaking down requirements in my task management system to a very small level, like just complete this tiny section today, or the intro to this particular essay, get it done today. The smaller sort of atomic element of a particular project that I made it, the easier it was to just move the ball down the field, just a little bit at a time. The other thing that helped me, though, and this is I'd be lying if I said it was just all roses. I didn't have any trouble with deadlines on this book, but in my life, a lot of other things slipped, right? There's a cost to everything.
That's very true. That's so true.
Yeah, right. I was late on all kinds of things because I was sitting at the coffee shop writing this book. And that's just the reality of doing the project for me, is that I did have some ADHD related balls that fell to the floor. So it happened. The other thing that was great about this one, which is not necessarily actionable for everybody, but I was in the middle of NaNoWriMo when Nikki started writing the book. And so this was now over a year ago, right? In 2023. And so Nikki was already well on the road to getting the book written when I had to jump in. And as someone, I think everybody kind of recognizes this, but maybe with ADHD, you might live this more, have a better grasp of this. The adrenal deadline is legitimate. Like coming in and already feeling like you're behind starts that adrenal system going, and that helps motivate you toward a goal much more quickly. It's not a healthy way to live. It's not a healthy way to write, but it is sometimes the tool that's required. And that definitely came in for me.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I like how you talk about, having enough of an outline that you can say, okay, I'm just tackling this segment today, rather than sitting down and saying, well, I'm writing a book, which is just, it's huge and abstract, and we just can't sit down and write a book. So yeah, I'm glad that you said that. I have clients who they tell me exactly what section of the book they're working on, and then I'm that external accountability. But breaking things down, that's really, really important. So thank you for that. So did you have any, with this book, any new like tricks or tools that helped you write the book? Anything new that you found useful?
It was all new because even though we had written a book so long ago, it was such a different process for me. Like, I don't really remember writing the first book all that much. Like I do, but I don't. Like
Yeah.
it felt like it was still that book to me felt like an extended blog post, right? That had a story that was around it. Where this book felt like there was more at stake because we were working with a publisher. And so it felt all very new. So like the tools and things that you're talking about, like all of it was new to me, and trying to figure out like, how to use this platform. What was the one that we used before we went to Microsoft Word?
We used Ulysses to write the initial draft of the book. Yeah. And as
that
soon
was
as
helpful.
it was hugely helpful, because it's definitely a distraction-free kind of environment. As soon as as we had to turn in our first draft for edits, the publisher uses Word, we migrated everything to Word.
Sure. But I think for that initial piece, it was helpful because we could look at it just by chapter, and I could see, where things were falling, and where things needed to move and change and around. So, yeah, it was an experience, but I enjoyed it. Like, that's the thing I think that was the most surprising to me, is that I never really considered myself an author. I wasn't really like we were lucky that we weren't necessarily looking for this opportunity came, and we were grateful for it, and we knew that we wanted to do something with it, and so I had to kind of like convince myself like I am an author, like I can do this, like I can write this, and get my head around that a little bit. That was new.
And that's a big step, Nikki, right? To go from, well, I've written a couple of things, to, oh no, wait a minute, I am an author. That's a huge mindset shift for you. And how did it feel to finally get there? Or are you there?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm there. Like, I have the book, I see it, and it's behind me, right? Like, but it's still very surreal. And it's one of those things that you put your heart and soul in it. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about perfectionism, but man, that gets in the way, doesn't it? Like, because you don't know exactly when to stop or when to let go of it. But there's still this like balance of, I'm not ready to let go of this yet. And one of the examples I have of that is we're having a meeting with our contact, and she is praising us about how wonderful we are to work with and how we've met all of our deadlines and we're doing all of these great things. And then at the very end of the conversation, I say, so I really would like to add another chapter. I don't think it's over yet. I need the last chapter. Yes. And I didn't know what she was going to say, but she was like, okay, like we'll make that happen. If you think that we need I needed to wrap it up a little differently than what I had.
Yeah.
I knew that I really wanted that to happen for me to feel like it was complete. So I think there's a fine line between, what feels good, and then when do you let it go, or what does need improvement. And in that moment, I really felt like I needed to push for something to change.
Yeah.
And then after we had it and it was all completed, it felt good. It felt good to let it go and say, okay, we're bringing it out to the world. Let's see what happens.
I love that. All right. So check out their book, Take Control, ADHD.com/ADHD book. And Nikki and Pete have also talked about their podcast and the community. So I will make sure to get those links from them, and they will also be in the show notes. Right. Just before we dive into perfection, I want to talk about the structure of the book. Was that an intentional choice to kind of merge that personal essay storytelling with hard, this is what you do content?
Absolutely. It was intentional, because that's exactly how the podcast is that I'm coming from the ADHD coach perspective. He's coming from somebody that was living with ADHD. So it was actually really important to us that it was a distinction, so that when you read the book, you can see where I'm speaking and where Pete is speaking. It was so important that they have to redo the audio book version.
Yeah. They screwed up the voices on the audio
because they didn't do it correctly on the audio. And we said, we need to change this because it's critical to the book.
Yeah.
That when Pete is speaking and when I'm speaking. And so and they're going to make that happen. But it makes the book so much more interesting. If you were just to have a how-to book with, this is how you plan with ADHD, that's boring. But you get to, in every chapter, you get to read this essay from Pete, who is a wonderful writer, creative writer, and be able to really relate to it. And then, kind of you get to process that, think about it, and then you can move into, okay, what's the next step?
Yeah. No, I love that. I believe nonfiction books should always have stories and personal essays weaved through. This is my belief. Part of why I do what I do. All right, let's talk about perfectionism. Is it a scam?
Is it totally a scam? Who's making money at what end of the deal off of perfectionism? I think everybody loses. Right?
They sure do.
Yeah, we write quite a bit about that. About just the way we let our brains take advantage of us by convincing us that if it's not. If whatever our work product is not living up to some arbitrary level of perfect that we've set in our own heads, that are probably more influenced by our parents and what their parents taught them, that we're somehow failures or imposters. And it's a huge impediment to the creative process. It's just massive. It's an impediment to the productivity process too. Like it becomes an impediment to just life. But at the macro scale or the micro scale for our conversation, yeah, I think it gets in the way of actually releasing stuff. And I say that as somebody with 5 novels in the drawer. Like that's my life, right? Is figuring out how to get unstuck.
Yeah. So Pete, how do you talk to yourself around it? What do you do for it? What strategies have you found useful for yourself?
I love the concept of speaking truth to power, and sometimes I'm the power. I have to brainstorm with my wife, with my business partner. I have to say out loud, look, I think the word I tend to use is I'm backpocketing success. I've worked really hard creating this thing, whatever it is. Maybe it's a new podcast, maybe it's a book, but I put it in my back pocket even after I believe it's finished because I'm afraid of it not living up to perfection, of it not being the thing that I think everyone expects of me. And the truth of the matter is, and what I am explicitly asking for in return is, hey, Pete, nobody is thinking about you right now. Nobody expects anything from you right now. Just release the book. And I think that's the mantra I've sort of had to take on over the years. And it's what allows us to put new things, in the world every day.
Yes, it reminds me of that. Sometimes your teenagers talking to, and you want to turn around and go, believe it or not, you're not the center of the universe.
Yes.
Right?
Right. But our lizard brain doesn't like to hear that, right? Our lizard brain really thinks you're under a spotlight.
Exactly.
Well, and there were definitely a couple of conversations where Pete and I would have to reassure each other that the editors would tell us if this is really bad, right?
Yes.
Like they would tell us.
Yeah.
And so kind of having faith that, all right, somebody else, many editors are watching this, are reading this and putting their hands on it. And if it was really bad, we would know. So
I think the great one, our first editor, Amy, is just amazing. We just love Amy. And she was our line editor, right? And she was doing so much work for us. And when she wrote back after her first pass and said, hey, you guys, I'm a legit fan of this book, and then proceeded to show up to all of our sort of media and launch events, like she was always there. And that was a real signal that this is getting through to someone who spends all day looking at books and doing these things. But this one helped her in a way that just reminded us, oh, maybe we are in the right place here. We're in the right place for this message right now.
Right.
I love that. That's excellent. I'm glad you were well supported by the publisher, because
Huge.
you hear some authors are really well supported and some authors are not. So I'm thrilled to hear that you were well supported by the publisher, well, at least by this one editor, but I'm assuming the publisher sounds like they had a really good support the author culture, right? So
absolutely.
And certainly really on the front end of the actual writing process, the publishing process, they were great. Yeah,
good. So I'm going to ask you for 3 takeaways or actions, but before I ask that, I want to ask you, is there anything we've missed? Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything that's important that you want to say before we wrap up?
There's just one thing that I would say that we didn't really touch on. There were a lot of rewrites. And that is the thing that I never expected, and that really surprised me, is that when the first draft was due, I was feeling like that had to be the draft that was going to be published, right? No one told me that wasn't the case. I didn't realize that we would have 3 to 4 more editors going through this process, and that I would even have the opportunity to say, wait, I want to put in an extra chapter, or I want to change this around. Those were the things I didn't know. And once you learn that, because you're living it, I realized, looking back, like there were so many opportunities, and we used them to rewrite and to move things around, and really is so much like a puzzle. And that's the one thing I would, say that I just learned that I just wasn't expecting, is like how much rewriting would happen, and to expect that. And it's good. It's a good thing. It's a very positive thing.
Yeah. Lots and lots and lots of rewrites.
And I think it helps with the perfectionism, because that what you're writing doesn't have to be the final draft.
Yes.
That other eyes are going to be on it. There's going to be other ideas. There's going to be things that you may want to add, or it ends up getting dumped all together, whatever. But I think that it kind of releases that pressure of perfectionism a little bit.
Yes.
My favorite writing.
Yeah, go ahead.
My favorite writing professor in college said to me, look, Pete, writing doesn't start until the second draft. And I've always kept that in my, in my quite heavy back pocket, that, I'm feeling really stressed about a first draft. Just get words on page. The real craft will start when you look at it the second time.
Exactly. And what I always say to my clients is, I can't help you if it's in your head.
Yeah.
I can't edit what's in your head. I can only help you once it's on the page. It doesn't matter if it looks like coal and you want a diamond. Just, get the coal out and we'll pressurize it into a diamond later. But until there's coal, you can't make diamonds, right?
Right.
So something I always say to the authors. Okay, anything else before we wrap up? We're good? Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. So 3 action items or takeaways from our conversation that will help the audience kind of, break through their creative chaos.
Nikki, you have them? Do you have 3? Do you want 3 each, or do we have to share?
No, 3 total.
Okay.
3 total.
3 total. Okay. Well, you go first, Pete.
All right. Okay. I think that for me, as somebody who I write, I think I write more than Nikki. I'm part of a number of sort of fiction projects. For me, have multiple things going at the same time. I find having a startup and a cool down project that I can work on that isn't the primary project I'm moving toward, completion is really nice, just to be able to change voice, to get myself warmed up. So taking 10 minutes before I actually start the work of the primary project to just say, what does Joe think about living in the city, and just start a new creative kind of dump there is very, very useful. Have multiple things going.
I like that. Thank
Great.
you.
Multiple things going. I would say if you don't know already, figure out where you write best at, try a couple different places like a coffee shop or a library. I tried the library. That didn't work as well for me, but the coffee shop definitely did. But kind of figure out where you like to write, when you like to write. Are you a morning person, afternoon person? When do you feel, most motivated? And just really lean into that. And if it seems strange to somebody else, that doesn't matter. It's whatever works best for you.
Nice. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I guess I have one more because we have 3,
Yes,
right?
we need.
Yes.
I am a huge believer in falling in love with the tool that you use to write. I think that it's really important to love whatever keyboard tool, whatever you use, whatever software application you use, that you love it so much you can get really intimate with it. You know all the keyboard shortcuts. You know how to just move fast to reduce friction getting words from your head to the page. However you do it, love it to the point that you know it inside and out. How many times do you run into people who are like, I knew I had to use Scrivener. Everybody told me I had to use Scrivener, but I just can't make sense of it. Well, go ahead and just get a pen and paper and see how that works, right? Try things.
I love that. And I'm going to add to that because you said, everyone told me to use Scrivener. I want to add to that you can just use Microsoft Word or a journal or Google Docs or, we're always, we get this feeling that we have to go use something fancy in order to be an author, or we need to have the top of the line running shoes before we can run. It's not true. Just get started. Use the simplest thing you can find and get started. I'm just going to add that to the mix.
Well, and it's such a mantra. That's what ended us up at Ulysses, because it's so simple. It's just absolutely basic. There are no buttons. There's no fonts. You just write.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Nothing to have to memorize and learn and become an expert in. When you're really just what you want to do is write. Thank you so much for both of you. I really appreciate your conversation today. I've had a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us today on Author Nation. I hope this conversation has reminded you that your writing process does not have to look like some traditional writing process to be powerful. It's you finding the right strategies and the support for you to get your book written. So remember to visit authornation.online for resources to support your nonfiction journey. And if you love this episode, which I know you did, leave a review, share it with a friend, and tell someone who needs it that they should listen to it. Your support helps us continue bringing you valuable content. So keep writing, keep creating, and continue sharing your unique stories with the world.